For any good story, you need a good prelude. So let's go back to Yaakov and Esau, his brother. If Yaakov can be called Israel, Esau can be called anti-Israel. Why am I saying that? Well, we all know that Yaakov founded the 12 tribes of Israel. Esau founded the nation of Edom, which became the nation of Amalek, which had the sole purpose and desire to eradicate the Jewish people, even in the esteemed memory of Moshe. When he was leading the children of Israel, they purposely bypassed the land of Amalek. They went out of their way to bypass that land, not to intrude on their water rights, not to intrude on their territory whatsoever, not to have any kind of military threatening posture whatsoever. But the Amalekites went out of their way to attack Israel. They did this twice. You remember the story of King Saul and the prophet Samuel? Remember they dealt with the Amalek during that time. And the reason why King Saul lost his throne, his crown, is because he disobeyed Hashem directly by not utterly eradicating even the memory of Amalekite. But he preserved the king of that Amalekite tribe even during that time. And legend says while he was put in prison, and the prophet Samuel was off on doing other tasking, Samuel had assumed that all the Amalekites, all their cattle, everything, because everything was cursing with Amalekite. They were a polytheistic nation that hated Israel's very existence. They hated the Torah. They hated the Jewish people. They hated everything about us. What does that say about people today and the Jewish people? Don't want to get off target yet. But consider this, by tradition, the king of Amalek actually got a woman pregnant, and she left and escaped with this child to found the Amalekite nation all over again before the final sentence that Samuel carried out instead of King Saul, and had the king of Amalek beheaded. So let's go to the story of Esther and Mordecai and Haman. Who are these people? To understand how to play a chess game, you need to know, first of all, the chess pieces, the bishop, the pawn, the other pieces on the chessboard. You need to know how to play the game. You have to know who the players are. I don't know if you know the story of Purim. It's known as the Megillah. We traditionally read the entire book of the sacred writing of the book of Esther during this holiday. So during the time of Persia, of Jewish exile, if you consider when the prophet Daniel, blessed memory, was exiled in Babylon around 605 BCE, well, then you had the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when you had the King Cyrus II allowed Ezra and Darius after him, allowed Ezra and Nehemiah and remnant Jews that wanted to return to Judea and establish a Jewish presence in Judea for the first time after all that exile period, hundreds and hundreds of years. Well, there was a group of Jews that remained in Persia. At the same time, you had Jews in Judea. So the Jews that remained behind in Persia is where I'm talking about now. And this is about more or less around 400 BCE, if you want to look at a time scale to get context. So I'm going to read a brief story synopsis here. King Ahasuerus dethrones Queen Vashti. He didn't like her. She didn't come at the king's beckon. Whatever, we don't have a lot of detail, but he either exiled or executed her. Esther is crowned queen after winning a beauty contest. So there was, when the king lost his queen, how do you get another queen? Well, you bring all the most beautiful women to your throne room, to the area in which you had your ballroom or whatever. So there was a great festival, whatever, and it was a beauty contest. So they had women in which the king would handpick who would want to be the next queen. Now Mordecai was either Esther's uncle or cousin, we're not sure, but he essentially acted as a role of a grandfather or as a parent. The parents of Esther is not known, but we do know that Mordecai and Esther were observant Jews. So Mordecai, the uncut was a plot to kill the king and reports it. So he got into favor with the king of Persia. So King Ahasuerus promotes Haman, making him more powerful than all the other officials. Mordecai refuses to bow before Haman, who was a close confidant to the king of Persia. Now, there was an adversarial situation between Haman, a descendant of Amalek, and Mordecai was a rabbi, or someone who was a cupbearer, essentially, of the king. And I always said that Amalekite has a generational history of hating Jewish people. So what does Haman do with his new role and authority in Persia? Well, Haman seeks to destroy the Jews after he gets into argument with Mordecai over Mordecai saying, I don't bow to anyone, implying that he only bows to God. This is a good segue to point out that the book of Esther, and I believe it was written all in Aramaic, it almost didn't make it in the Hebrew canon, the Tanakh, but it is considered divine today, divinely inspired. Mordecai and Esther were considered as prophets of God, but it was written in coded language in that it was written after all these events transpired that I'm getting to. But it's not mentioned the name of Hashem, God. It doesn't have Lord and things of that nature. But the thread, the story, the encoded message thread throughout the whole book is a sovereign God controlling history and revealing that history iteratively to Mordecai and Esther so they can make the right choices to save the Jewish people. So Mordecai appeals to Esther to save her people. Esther approaches the king Ahasuerus and invites him and Haman to a banquet. Mordecai is honored for having saved the king's life, so he's there. Little did Mordecai know that Haman already built a gallows to hang Mordecai and to kill the Jewish people. I guess that gossip was getting around by this time. Esther approaches the king Ahasuerus and invites him and Haman at the same banquet. Can you imagine looking across a banquet table at your arch enemy? Someone who wants to kill you if he's given half a chance. Awkward, right? So Mordecai is honored for having saved the king. Esther entertains the king and Haman invites him to a second banquet. I'll tell you why. Esther pleads for her people for the second banquet. She accuses Haman of a secret plot to not only kill all the Jewish people, but Esther came out of the closet and said, by the way, your wife, your queen, is Jewish too. So if Haman gets his way, he will execute the queen, your blessed queen, your bride, as well. The king didn't like that. So she pleads for the salvation of her people. She accuses Haman of his villainy. The king grants Esther's request and condemns Haman to die on the very gallows that he built for the Jews. The king grants Esther's request. the Jews defend themselves through Persia against those following out a decree to destroy the Jews. Now remember, Haman sent out these official seal of approval from the king. It may have a golden seal or something attached to a parchment, and he sent it out in all of Persia. So he had allies and people acting on his behalf. So what did the Jewish people who were exiled through different provinces throughout Persia? Well, they had to have help from the king of Persia to defend themselves. I want to point out the Jewish people will fight like a lion if given the opportunity to defend themselves. Consider the IDF today. The holiday of Purim is established and Mordecai advances to a position of importance. Okay, so I've just given you Purim in a nutshell. Now, what are the exciting, colorful things about this? Well, we have a grogger. I should have brought it and showed you. It makes a very loud and annoying sound. Every time the rabbi who reads the Megillah, the book of Esther, says, Haman, we shake that grogger and make a horrible, annoying sound, or we clang a bell, or just make a lot of racket and sound, okay? We have a lot of fun because we are commended by the sages of blessed memory to curse the very name of Amalek. It's interesting. There's certain names that are not allowed and strictly prohibited by observant Jews for naming their children. One of those is Amalek. Another is Balaam. Another is Korach. Another is Haman. And there are others as well. So there's a reason why these people are cursed. There's not too many Jews today are named Esau, by the way. I want to point out here about anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has its roots, and I've talked ad nauseum about this, but where did it really occur historically? In the time of Queen Esther and Mordecai. In Esther 3:8, a classic statement says, Haman then said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the other peoples, and all the prophecies in your realm, whose laws are different from those of any other people. They're unique, they're peculiar, and who do not obey the king's laws. Now, that was a blatant lie, by the way, and it is not in your majesty's interest to tolerate them. Folks, that was written about 400 BCE, 2,400 years ago. That same statement has been used by more than one anti-Semite in Earth's history of wars, World War I, World War II. I even heard of one rabbi point out that Germany has remnant of Edom, of the Amalekite, and Hitler may have been ancient ancestor of Haman. He wanted to destroy the Jewish people. Many people tried and they miserably failed. The anti-Israel aspect is still there, folks. Haman tells the king that because the Jews are different, they must be suspect. They're dangerous. Yeah, like Queen Isabella in Spain, 1492. Columbus sailed the ship to America. Yeah, the Jews were dangerous. So the king and queen of Spain in 1492 robbed the Jewish people, put it in their coffers, and expanded their wealth and navy force. That's what Hitler did. He robbed every single Jewish family, even took the gold out of their teeth, and used that to arm his war machine. This is what Haman was trying to do back then. This is why we should always remember the Amalek, the curse of Amalekite. When you hear the word Amalek, and you hear the word Haman, you need to say, boo, you need to say, curse these evil anti-Semites. People in Israel, south of Israel's border, are launching missiles and rockets and burning land and raping Jewish girls and stabbing rabbis in the back. They're doing everything they can to eradicate the Jewish people. So if it wasn't for Queen Esther, and we often celebrate predominantly male role figures like Judah Maccabee and Hanukkah. But when do we celebrate a woman? Well, this is the time we celebrate a woman like Esther. I don't want to mention any names, but I went to a conservative shul several years ago, about 5 years ago. And the rabbi there, a conservative rabbi, don't ask me why I got messed up in that. But anyway, was making so light of the book of Esther. He didn't believe it was even a real story, and he thought it was comical. Comical. Really. Esther was probably the bravest soul in the world. You can imagine. Mordecai essentially told Esther, I know I can't force you to do anything that you don't want to do. I've raised you a certain way, but this is what's going to happen. The Jews are going to survive some way in another quarter in the province. Will survive ultimately, but your entire family, including me, will be wiped out by this evil Haman if you don't go to the king and come out of the closet and tell him and confide in him and take a chance and tell him you are Jewish. See, the Jews at that time were hiding their sense of Jewishness. And that conservative show I went to, they actually had a Queen Esther pageant. That idea of coming out was gay Jews in a closet coming out and saying, I'm a proud flaming gay. That's what you see in a lot of Reform and conservative Jews, sects of Judaism, unfortunately. Coming out in Purim is about LGBTQI, whatever, soon to be P activism. It's not about that, folks. It's about wearing your kippah to cover your receding hairline when you get my age. It's about wearing a Star of David, you know, and being proud to be Jewish. It's about wearing your tzitzit katan, your holy underwear, right? It's about dressing like an Orthodox Jew on a holiday or Shabbat. It's about taking off work on a Jewish holiday when most of the people at work are totally clueless about Purim, when it comes or when it left. It's about being a proud Jew 24/7. Because in some places, even in Germany, Merkel's even told some of the people there, that are Jews, maybe you shouldn't wear your kippah in public if you don't want to be attacked. Maybe you should remove the mezuzahs off your door frame of your front door if you don't want to be targeted by anti-Semitism. That's not a solution, folks. I have an Israeli flag outside my home, and thank God, Baruch Hashem, most people say shalom. Well, God bless them for saying that. This is a short book. I encourage you to read it. It has historical value. It's probably one of the most unique books in the sacred writings of the Tanakh. Remember, you have the Torah, the 5 books of Moshe. You have the books of the prophets. And then you have the sacred writings. Esther falls in that. Purim is a more contemporary or modern era a holiday, believe it or not, even though it's 2,400 years ago when the story originated. It is still considered a minor holiday, but it's very major of my home because I have a beautiful little girl now who is born 100% Jewish. And one day she's going to have to deal with anti-Semitism. I want her to learn to always curse the Amalek. And every single way it's being rebranded today. And unfortunately, even in the Jewish Muspolka, in our camp, in our Jewish diaspora, there are Jews that are born Jewish and even have ancestors that died in the Holocaust who are as vile anti-Semite as Palestinians are who are trying to kill the Jewish people in Israel. George Soros, Bernie Sanders, I don't want to go on. Anyway, I want to wish you a very Purim Sameach, a very happy and very celebratory holiday. Enjoy this holiday if you're Jewish. If you're not Jewish, learn something you didn't know yesterday. God bless you and take care and be safe.
The Torah commands us to give to charity. Feeding yourself is in vain. The poor are always among us.
Thank you, kind sir. If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.